Good morning, guys. I'm Raina, and welcome to Small Retired Life. In this video, I will share 8 strategies that I used to help me save up for retirement. These strategies became pretty critical to me when I unexpectedly was retired in my late 50s. I will link a video above if you're interested in hearing that story. When I hit my early 50s, all of a sudden, retirement was no longer this hypothetical thing, but it was something that was around the corner. And I became obsessed with looking at YouTube videos and reading articles and questioning people about retirement and, started thinking about what that could look like for me. And I think as human beings, we always look for some magic solution, kind of a magic formula that will give us all the answers on how to do it right. And the fact is that I don't know if there is such a thing. I mean, it's all about saving money and planning and, understanding your own circumstances. But I did learn a lot through that exploration, and so I'm hoping that some of my strategies could potentially give some of you some ideas or some help or, just something to consider. I think it's also good to give a context regarding some statistics, at least in my area. So I live in Calgary, Alberta, in Canada, and I don't know if these statistics apply to anyone who lives in America or in Europe, but Canada's probably not too far off, at least America. So something that I looked up, there was a study done by Abacus Poll, which is like a huge polling company here in Canada, and they're very well regarded. And one of the major pension plans in Ontario, I think it was the healthcare workers, did a study on people retiring. And it was really kind of interesting because I'll just read some of these stats. So they're saying that 1 in 4 unretired Canadians, that's about 26% of unretired Canadians, say they expect to continue working in retirement in order to support themselves. And also at the same time, it says here that so 49% approximately of unretired Canadians haven't set any money aside for retirement in the last year. And those are pretty scary statistics. The other thing that's kind of interesting as well is that in my province of Alberta, only 5.5%, 6% of the population that can works for the government or for the public sector, which are organizations that provide you with pension plans. Everyone else works in the private sector, and only about 19% of the private sector provides pensions here in this province. So that means most people working in the province of Alberta don't have pension plans. A lot of the employers here do contribution programs where they'll contribute a certain amount of money, but you have to match that contribution. And that's kind of the most common scheme. And part of the reason for that is especially here in Calgary, a lot of the bigger companies are oil and gas, and they get sold frequently. So it's not unusual for people to get laid off. And if you get laid off after only working for so many years, you never actually vest into a pension plan. And I think that's part of the reason why many companies don't offer kind of a traditional indexed type of pension plan. You guys, I have to be honest, when I was in my early 20s, in my 20s and in my very, very early 30s, I was terrible with money. I had no clue about budgeting. I didn't know what a share was. I didn't know about the stock market. I was married very young, practically a child bride. I was like 18 when I got married, and I had kids in my early 20s. And then I was divorced in my very early 30s. And so life was really all about coping and making rent and just being able to afford groceries and getting by paycheck to paycheck. I hated that. I hated that feeling. And I went back to school. I got my university degree because the education I had prior to being divorced was pretty much useless. The world had changed. And so I lucked into a job in the capital market sector doing investor relations. And honestly, that is what taught me about money and about the stock market and about investing. And it changed everything. I had really crappy jobs at the beginning. I think my first job, I made like $24,000 a year, and my rent was like $850 a month. It was crazy, you guys. I could barely make ends meet. But finally, when I was in my very late 30s, I think I was like 39, I finally got a great job. It had an excellent salary, amazing benefits. It had a contribution plan, savings plan, and I made a very conscious decision. I decided that I was going to change my money habits. I was going to learn as much as I could about investing, and I was going to get myself into a place where I was financially secure. I had control over my finances. I had no debt, and I was the one in control because I really believed that that would set me up well for the future, and, that maybe that would prevent me from becoming a bag lady. Let's discuss some of the strategies now. Strategy number one: whenever an employer offered some kind of a savings program where they would contribute money and I would contribute money into some kind of an investment or savings vehicle, I made sure to take advantage of that scheme. At the beginning, when I first started working and I did not make a lot of money, it was really hard to take that money out of my paycheck to contribute to a savings program. But I knew it was critical that I do that. I was told that a lot of people actually don't choose to participate because they do have to take some money out of their pay to contribute to these plans. But to me, it was free money. Your employer was contributing money as long as you contributed money. And so to me, that was free money. So always take advantage of any kind of program that your employer has where you have the opportunity to put aside some money and they contribute some on your behalf as well to grow your savings. Strategy number two is take advantage of any kind of tax advantageous investment vehicles such as RSPs, TFSAs, or IRAs in the US or 401ks, where you can hold investments in these vehicles, but not have to pay taxes on any of the income that's made within these accounts, and max them out as much as you can. I was not able to max these out at the beginning of my career, but as my salary improved and as my situation improved, I caught up and I was able to max all of these accounts out. And the RSP is what pays my income right now. The investments in that account hold shares and ETFs and give me monthly dividends, which I now live on. My third strategy was when it came to real estate. I really hated paying rent, you guys. To me, it was like a waste of money. And I just felt that I would rather be funding my own real estate than someone else's. And when I was in my late 30s, I had a boyfriend and we had dated for quite a few years, but we weren't living together. I'm not sure that he was that eager to buy a place, but we did find this loft downtown, and it was not a space that I particularly cared for. I just didn't think it was the right space for me in my situation because I had kids part of the time, and it just kind of was not the ideal space. But I decided that he was interested in buying that, so I would go in on it as well because it was better to have our own place than to be paying rent. So we purchased that place and eventually we went our separate ways, but that place had actually gained value. So when we sold it, I had a tidy little profit from that particular loft. And I was able to go out on my own and purchase a really nice apartment in a great area in Calgary. And I lived in that apartment for 6 years. And over that 6 year period, the real estate market really started booming here. So when I met my partner, we decided to purchase a home, and I was able to put a very significant down payment on a fairly good size home in a great area again in Calgary. We eventually sold that home because it was way too big for two people. By then, my kids were older and they were grown up, and we sold the home, made a good profit on it, and bought a much smaller home for less money. And when I lived in that home, I had no mortgage, which was fantastic because then I was able to take the money that I normally would be spending on a mortgage payment and I was able to invest that money. And when you get into that place, you guys, it's a game changer because as most of you know, mortgage payments are expensive. They take up a chunk of your earnings. And when you don't have that expense, you can seriously start putting money away and investing. As I mentioned in one of my other videos, which I'm going to try and link here again, I have to learn how to do that. My partner and I went our separate ways about 4 years ago, and then I purchased my little townhouse. Well, it's not that little. I guess it's around 1,300 square feet. And for one person, it's absolutely perfect. And I have no mortgage here. And that really has set me up well for retirement. Not having a mortgage is absolutely critical when you go into retirement. Actually, being debt free in general is pretty critical. My fourth strategy was that I saved every single bonus, every single tax refund. If I got laid off from a company because it got bought by another company and I got a great layoff package, I made sure to save every penny of all of that instead of, buying fancy cars or, buying a fancier place to live or overextending myself in other areas. I made sure to just take that money and put it into savings towards retirement. And over the years, as I kind of developed in my career and I had better jobs and better positions, some of the bonuses were pretty good. And when I got laid off from a couple of jobs from companies that got sold, I received some amazing layoff packages, and I was able to save all of that because I chose not to use it for fancy vacations. I always spent a tiny bit of that money on something, but we're talking about like a minuscule amount. Most of it went into savings. I guess the fifth strategy does touch back on the real estate, and that is that I paid off my mortgages as soon as I could. Again, when I received extra money, I did put most of it into savings, but some of it went also into my mortgage because I considered that my real estate was an investment. So by paying down my mortgage, to me, that was essentially investing my money. And by paying down my mortgage sooner, I was able then to save more money later on because I had no mortgage payments. So that is a strategy that you can use by focusing on paying down your mortgage. You can get out of debt faster. Strategy number 6 is I did not have debt. I did not buy cars that I couldn't afford to pay cash for. I had very cheap, very basic cars, kind of in the early part of my career. I remember actually owning this Pontiac Vibe, and I was giving some kids a ride. And they were like, Raina, how do I get the window down? I can't see a button. And I was like, yeah, you have to like roll the window down because I couldn't afford a car at the time that had automatic windows. I know that sounds crazy now, but I mean, that's how it was. I finally did eventually get a great car when I I think I got a new job and my salary was going to be a lot higher and I wanted a nice car because I had never had a nice car. So I went and bought a really nice Audi, but I bought it used. So it was a couple of years old. I was able to pay cash. And that was 11 years ago and I still drive that car today. So yeah, I just am not a believer in switching out my cars every 2 years, and that strategy has kept me debt-free. And being debt-free means that you have more money to invest because you're not spending money on paying down debt, and also it helps you down the road when you are retired because you've become accustomed to living debt-free. Strategy number 7 was to always live below my means. So, especially later, as kind of time went on and I did get better jobs, I could have lived in a much fancier home or driven fancier cars or changed out my cars. And I always made sure I lived below what I made because to me, A, it allowed me to save money, and B, it was good practice for down the road. And I hated that feeling that, like living paycheck to paycheck. I had done that when I was younger, and it was so stressful, you guys. I just felt like, okay, if I lose a job, it's going to be so bad because, there's no give. And so for me, it was just a luxury to be able to not feel that way. And by living less or by living within my means or even a little bit below my means, that stress just wasn't there. I had savings. I felt better about my life, about my situation. And also, if an emergency happened, I knew that I could deal with it. So, not having debt and living below your means, huge thing, you guys. Finally, the last strategy, number 8, I made sure I learned about investing. And I worked in capital markets, so investments and markets and stocks and public companies and all of that was normal language to me and definitely was an advantage because I knew what I was doing. But I was always a very careful investor. I only invested in companies that paid dividends or in exchange traded funds or ETFs that had monthly or quarterly income that was paid to me. And when I wasn't retired, I took that income and I reinvested it in more stock or more ETFs. And I only invested in things that I understood. I felt that if I invested in a company, I wanted to understand what it did as a business. So I mostly have stocks of companies that are either banks or financial firms or utility companies or that type of thing. So those are kind of the 8 strategies that I used that helped me fund my retirement. Um, I I'm glad that I was careful during the time that I was working because that retirement came very suddenly, very unexpectedly, and I was able to deal with it. And I was able to kind of relax and say, "Hey, I'm going to be okay." All right, you guys, thank you for tuning in. I hope some of these suggestions will be of value to you. Please remember, I am not a financial advisor of any kind. These are just things that I'm sharing that have worked for me. If you have any comments, please leave them in the comment section below. Please subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so that you know next time I upload. And I will see you next week.